In 1965, after over 10 years of striving to achieve his dream of becoming a successful musician and joining the elite of the emerging rock and roll scene, Roy Orbison began to witness a decline in his fame. Despite his earlier hits like Working for the Man, Only the Lonely, and the unforgettable Oh, Pretty Woman, which ranked 224 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, his popularity started to wane. Even though he secured a lucrative deal with MGM Records, his career started to falter. Following his passing from a heart attack in 1988, Rolling Stone noted in his obituary that the MGM producers lacked the magic touch of Fred Foster, the producer behind Orbison's most iconic tracks. Roy Orbison, often referred to as the Caruso of rock, was undeniably one of the early trailblazers of rock and roll music. Throughout a career spanning more than 30 years until his premature death in 1988, the Big O and his unique voice influenced countless musical legends, including the likes of the Beatles, Bruce Springsteen, and Bob Dylan. Whether delivering a rockabilly anthem or a poignant ballad that tugs at the heartstrings, Orbison's operatic vocals and distinctive emotive quality never failed to captivate even the most seasoned of singers. Little did he realize that his diminishing appeal among pop music enthusiasts was just the beginning of a series of tragic events in the tumultuous life of Roy Orbison. Well then, join us today as we uncover the truth behind Roy Orbison's tragic life and why he was said to be the saddest man in rock. But before we begin, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and feel free to let us know in the comment section below who you would be interested in hearing from in our next video. Roy Orbison's music was both impressive and perplexing. Despite his stoic demeanor, his songs were filled with life and his voice exuded a remarkable bravado. George Harrison once remarked that Orbison remained unmoved, comparing him to marble. Elvis Presley even hailed him as the greatest singer in the world. However, beneath this extraordinary talent lay a tragic story that drove Orbison deeper into the solace of his creativity. Orbison's journey as a performer had a rocky start due to stage fright, but this same shyness ended up defining his unique style. His iconic dark glasses were a tool to combat his fears, and his stillness on stage was a result of his nerves. Orbison channeled his vulnerability into his songwriting, creating music that challenged the norms of masculinity at the time. Despite his humble beginnings, he quickly rose to fame after signing with Monument in 1960. Orbison became an unexpected heartthrob, an inspiration to many songwriters, and a beloved performer who even earned high praise from Elvis Costello. Unfortunately, his success was marred by personal tragedies starting in late 1964. In 1957, Orbison tied the knot with his sweetheart, Claudette Frady. She was only 17 years old at the time, while he was 21. As their whirlwind romance faced the challenges of Orbison's sudden fame, cracks started to appear in their relationship. Eventually, in November 1964, Orbison decided to divorce Claudette due to her alleged infidelities. However, within 10 months, they managed to reconcile their differences and reignite their love for each other. This reunion happened at the same time as Orbison's big break, as he left Monument Records and signed a lucrative $1 million deal with MGM. This opportunity allowed him to venture into the film industry, which he had always adored. It also meant that he could tour less and spend more quality time at home. With their newfound free time, the couple indulged in their shared passion for motorbikes and frequently embarked on thrilling rides on racetracks and tours around the world. On June 6, 1966, tragedy struck when Claudette and Orbison were riding their motorbikes. Unfortunately, Claudette collided with the door of a pickup truck and lost her life instantly. After this devastating incident, Orbison found solace in his creative pursuits and dedicated himself entirely to his work. He spent countless hours writing and going on tours, but he couldn't escape the changing times and his own circumstances. Orbison later reflected, saying, "I couldn't find much I could relate to, so I stood there like a tree, witnessing the winds of change and the passing seasons, yet still standing strong and blooming again." During this period of relentless work with little reward, Orbison spent less time with his sons and more time in the studio and on long road trips for world tours. However, tragedy struck once again in September 1968, while Orbison was in Birmingham, England. He received the devastating news that a fire had engulfed his home in Tennessee, resulting in the tragic loss of his two eldest sons. Orbison's life took a drastic turn after this loss, plunging him into a period of emotional turmoil. However, a glimmer of solace appeared in 1969 when he found love and married Barbara Jacobs. Together, they would go on to have 2 children. Despite this, the grief he experienced greatly hindered his ability to work, causing his musical stardom to fade. Fortunately, a resurgence came in the 1980s with the formation of the Traveling Wilburys and a renewed appreciation for his music in popular culture. Yet, the profound personal losses he endured continued to shape the latter part of his career. It is a testament to his inner strength that he managed to channel his talents and bring comfort to others through his art once again. Orbison was born in Vernon, Texas on April 23, 1936. He was the second of 3 sons born to Orby Lee Orbison and Nadine Vester Schultz. Orby worked as an oilfield driller, while Nadine enjoyed painting and writing poetry. Roy's direct paternal ancestry can be traced back to Thomas Orbison from Lurgan, Northern Ireland. The family moved to Fort Worth in 1942 to find work in the aircraft factories. Due to eyesight problems, Roy wore thick glasses from a young age. Roy's father gave him a guitar on his 6th birthday, and he was taught how to play by his father and older brother. Music became the focus of his life, with country and western swing music being his major influence. Roy was particularly moved by Lefty Frizzell's singing, leading him to adopt the stage name Lefty Wilbury during his time with the Traveling Wilburys. He also enjoyed the music of Hank Williams, Bob Wills, Moon Mullican, and Jimmy Rogers. Orbison was exposed to various music genres in West Texas, including rhythm and blues, western swing, Tex-Mex, orchestral arrangements, and Cajun music. Orby Lee, Roy's father, is often recognized as the one who taught Roy how to play the guitar. However, he also received guidance from Charlie Orbison, Orby Lee's brother, and Kenneth Schultz, Nadine's brother. Along with Clois Russell, Orby Lee's neighbor and co-worker, they would frequently play and sing together. Roy's first song was the timeless classic You Are My Sunshine. He picked up the skill quickly, allowing him to join the adults and sing late into the night. The Orbison family relocated to Fort Worth around 1942, where they found work in the munitions and aircraft factories that had expanded due to America's involvement in World War II. In 1944, due to a polio outbreak, Roy and his older brother Grady were sent to live with their maternal grandmother, a divorcee, in Vernon. That same year, Roy wrote his first song, A Vow of Love, in front of his grandmother's house. In 1945, he participated in and won a contest on KVWC in Vernon, leading to his own radio show where he sang every Saturday. The following year, a medicine show arrived in town, and Roy entered a talent contest singing Mountain Dew, and Joel Blon, tying for first place with a 15-year-old. The prize was $15, so he received $7.50 and split it with his friend who helped carry his guitar. After the war ended, the family reunited in Vernon and eventually moved out west to Wink, Texas, in late 1946. Roy formed his first band, the Wink Westerners, at the age of 13 in 1949. In 1951, Roy started making regular appearances on KERB radio in Kermit. 2 years later, the band landed their own show on KERB, sponsored by local businessmen, airing once a week before school. The Wink Westerners' debut was at a school assembly, and they were also featured on the KERB Jamboree alongside other local country and western bands. Their repertoire included songs like Corliga, Mexican Joe, Caribbean, and Under the Double Eagle. However, they didn't stick to just country music. they gradually incorporated big band standards and instrumentals like In the Mood and A Little Brown Jug, as well as pop standards. During the summer, Orbison worked various jobs like shoveling tar for the county or painting water towers in the oil fields. He was involved in the marching band, singing octet, and even attempted to play the baritone horn. In 1952, he took on the role of manager for Wink High School's Kittens football team. At a gig in McCamey's Lions Club, the band was offered a paid dance performance despite only knowing a handful of songs. They quickly learned more tunes and practiced at the community center, eventually getting paid for doing what they loved. They were invited to tour West Texas with R.A. Lipscomb, who was campaigning for district governor of the Lions Club in 1953. The band also performed at the 36th International Lions Club Convention in Chicago from July 3 to July 11 that year, staying at the Conrad Hilton Hotel. Roy graduated from Wink High in June 1954, enrolled in the fall seminar at North Texas State College in Denton, and returned home to play the New Year dance on December 31, 1954 with the Wink Westerners. Wade Lee Moore and Dick Penner were two college friends of Roy's at Denton, and they had written the Ooby Dooby. Dick Penner arranged for them to record his song at Jim Beck's studio in the outskirts of Dallas, Texas, which is southeast of Denton. Beck had been instrumental in the discovery of Lefty Frizzell and Marty Robbins for Columbia Records, so the band headed for Dallas to record Dooby Dooby and Hey, Miss Fanny, which appears to be a duet of Roy Orbison and James Morrow. The session took place at some point during the summer of 1955 before the boys returned to West Texas. Roy was convinced that they would be signed to Columbia Records, which never happened. During the summer of '55, the Wink Westerners regrouped back in West Texas. When not appearing at local clubs, they would play at the Saturday Night Jamboree in Jal, New Mexico. The band somehow managed to appear, along with other local country and western bands, on a Saturday afternoon television show on KMID-TV Channel 2, out of Midland. In addition to their regular repertoire, they began to play some rock and roll numbers including That's All Right Mama, Rock Around the Clock, and of course, Ooby Dooby. They were an instant success and as a result were given their own 30-minute show on Friday nights on KMID. Orbison enrolled at Odessa Junior College in the fall of 1955 wanting to major in geology, but then changed to history and English. Soon, the band moved in together to a duplex in Walnut Street in Odessa. With a couple of new members, they renamed themselves the Teen Kings as they were playing more and more rock and roll. They got a second weekly local TV show on Saturdays from 4:30 to 5 p.m. on KOSA TV, Odessa, Channel 7, which was part of the national CBS network. Johnny Cash and also Elvis Presley came in town to perform around this time and appeared on Roy's TV show. Roy asked Johnny for advice on how to get a record released and Cash gave him Sam Phillips' telephone number in Memphis. He called Mr. Phillips, who hung up the phone saying, "Johnny Cash doesn't run my record company." Orbison was approached by a local entrepreneur named Weldon Rogers, who had a partner named Chester C. Oliver. They were starting a new record label called J.E.Well and wanted to record Roy and his band. Roy was excited about the offer and quickly arranged a recording session at Norman Petty Studio in Clovis, New Mexico on March 4, 1956. During this session, Roy and the Teen Kings recorded the Clovis songs Trying to Get to You and Ooby Dooby. The single was released around 2 weeks later, on March 19, 1956. On the same day, Roy took a copy of the single to Cecil Hollifield, a well-known record dealer in Odessa. Hollifield liked the record and played it over the phone for one of his connections in Memphis. The person on the other end of the line asked for a copy and turned out to be Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records. A few days later, Hollifield called Roy to inform him that Phillips wanted the Teen Kings to come to Memphis in 3 days to record for Sun Records. Roy Orbison and the Teen Kings arrived in Memphis on Monday, March 26, 1956. The following day, they re-recorded Ooby Dooby, Trying to Get to You, and Go Go Go, Down the Line. Bob Neal, the owner of Starts Incorporated, signed the group to a booking and management contract. They started off with an experimental tour of Southern drive-in movie theaters, performing on the roofs of the projection houses between film showings. They often toured with other country and rockabilly stars such as Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, Warren Smith, Sonny Burgess, Farron Young, Johnny Horton, and later Jerry Lee Lewis. Ooby Dooby reached number 59 on the national charts in June 1956, but the subsequent Sun singles did not chart. During this time, Roy began to focus on developing his songwriting skills. The Teen Kings disbanded in December 1956, and Roy started using studio musicians for his upcoming Sun sessions. He remained with Sun Records until 1958. Bob Neal offered Roy a spot on an Everly Brothers show in Hammond, Indiana in March 1958. The Everlys needed a song for their new single and they asked Roy if he had anything. He sang his new composition Claudette and they asked him to write the words down. So he did, on the top of a show box. Later, Wesley Rose, from Acuff Rose Music Publishing in Nashville, signed Roy Orbison with his Nashville publishing company. He also gave Roy a contract with RCA Victor where he briefly worked with Chet Atkins. The Everlys' Claudettes was released on late March 1958 as the B-side of All I Have to Do Is Dream. The A-side went to number 1, Claudette peaked at number 30. At this point, his songs were also recorded by Buddy Holly, Jerry Lee Lewis and Rick Nelson. Wesley Rose rapidly got Orbison another contract with the new independent Monument Records when his RCA deal ran out in mid-1959. Back in Texas, Roy had been writing with Joe Melson, and after a false start they came up with Uptown, which was recorded and released in late 1959. Uptown sold better than any other Orbison record since Ooby Dooby, peaking halfway up the Hot 100. The sound was something different. It had strings as opposed to fiddles, which were not very common in Nashville. The third single for Fred Foster's Monument label was Only the Lonely, which became the first song that truly probed the frightening potential of Roy Orbison's voice and established his uniqueness. The song peaked at number 2 on the Billboard charts and became number 1 in the UK. The challenge to consolidate Only the Lonely was a difficult one. The follow-ups, Blue Angel and I'm Hurting, were cloned too closely from Only the Lonely, and it took another few tries for Orbison and Melson to come up with something special. That next magical success was Running Scared, and it climbed all the way up to number 1 in the USA. A few things contributed to Roy Orbison's success. The songs, the production, and the performance were key factors. The songs were completely original in structure, sound and style. Totally innovative compositions that didn't exist until then. It became a style. Fred Foster really went for quality instead of quantity. He was willing to splash money on a session without any guarantee of payback. He was also willing to take a chance on a sound that did not conform to accepted market norms. After that, Roy Orbison released a string of hits including Crying, Candy Man, Dream Baby, Working for the Man, Leah, In Dreams, Pretty Paper, Blue Bayou, Mean Woman Blues, and It's Over. This impressive run of top 40 hits lasted for 4 years, solidifying Roy as the top-selling American artist and one of the world's most renowned names. In May 1963, Roy's success with In Dreams led to an invitation to tour England alongside the Beatles, who were relatively unknown in the United States at the time. The tour sold out in just one afternoon, with Roy performing 14 encores on the first night before the Beatles could take the stage. Despite the British invasion, Roy Orbison continued to thrive and even grow in popularity. His unique releases, diverse content, and masterful songwriting set him apart in the music industry. His attention to detail and ability to make changes on the fly added a commercial polish to his songs that resonated with audiences worldwide. Recorded on August 1, 1964, Oh Pretty Woman became Roy's biggest hit, co-written with Bill Dees. The song topped charts globally, selling an estimated 7 million copies in the same year of its release. Roy's success extended to tours with the Beach Boys in 1964, the Rolling Stones in 1965, and extensive performances throughout Europe. Several major record companies showed interest in Orbison after his tenure with Monument. MGM made an offer of $1 million. The first single, Ride Away, was a modest success, but it would be the biggest single in the US that Roy would have for over 20 years. What seemed to be just a change of record labels became a huge turn in Roy's career. MGM was very successful at that time, but also that was about to change. Monument was Roy's label, but at MGM he was just one more act. Quantity was chosen over quality, and he was required to release certain amount of singles and albums per year, which took its toll. A dark period followed as Orbison's personal life began to unravel. In 1966, his wife Claudette, whom he married in 1957, tragically died in a motorcycle accident. Things took a turn for the worse 2 years later when 2 of his 3 children perished in a fire that destroyed his Hendersonville home. Roy sold the property to his close friend Johnny Cash, whose own house at the same spot would later burn down as well. Roy struggled to write songs for some time, but he remained optimistic and continued to tour. Towards the end of 1966, Roy began filming The Fastest Guitar Alive, his only starring role. His final entry in the US Top 100 for the remainder of the 1960s and 1970s was Cry Softly Lonely One in July 1967. In August 1968, Roy met a German woman named Barbara Ann Marie Wilhonen Jacobs in Leeds, England. She relocated to the USA later that year, and they tied the knot in Nashville on May 25, 1969, embarking on constructing a new home just a block away from where Roy's old house once stood on Old Hickory Lake in Hendersonville, Tennessee. As his contract with MGM concluded in 1973, Roy signed a 1-year deal with Mercury Records in 1974 without much fanfare. Nevertheless, he always had a record on the chart somewhere in the world, such as Penny Arcade reaching number 1 in Australia for several weeks and Too Soon to Know peaking at number 3 in England. Following his brief stint with Mercury Records, Roy re-signed with Monument in January 1976 to revitalize his career amidst extensive touring in the Far East, Australia, Asia, and Europe. Roy faced the consequences of heavy smoking, rigorous touring, and life on the road when he underwent open-heart surgery at St. Thomas Hospital in Nashville on January 18, 1978. Remarkably, he was back on tour just 3 weeks later to demonstrate his resilience. Things began to take a turn for the better in the US around this time. Roy's popularity was always shining bright in Europe, especially in England where everyone knew who he was. Despite being more popular overseas and doing more shows there than at home, a wave of success hit when Linda Ronstadt, Van Halen, and Don McLean all had massive hits with Roy's songs. This marked the start of a revival for Roy's career. Several key factors played a role in revitalizing Roy's career in the USA. Winning a Grammy with Emmylou Harris in 1980, having his song Wild Hearts Run Out of Time featured in the film Insignificance, releasing the Class of '55 LP with his Sun record mates, relocating to Malibu, California in late 1985, re-recording his greatest hits for an upcoming LP with Silver Eagle from Canada, and the use of his song In Dreams in the film Blue Velvet all contributed to putting Roy back on the musical map. Blue Velvet, a cult film, helped Roy regain a contemporary edge, fulfilling his desire to stay relevant. It was announced that Roy would be inducted into the 2nd Annual Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in New York on January 21, 1987. Bruce Springsteen, who inducted him, expressed how Roy's music had influenced him deeply. Following this, Roy signed with Virgin Records, who promptly re-released his greatest hits on an LP titled In Dreams Greatest Hits. Collaborating with new songwriters, including Jeff Lynne, Roy began recording new material for the upcoming Virgin LP in Los Angeles, sparking high expectations for what was to come. Roy's resurgence in the US was further solidified by his appearance on the popular TV show Saturday Night Live in 1987, where he performed his hit song, Crying, at a critical acclaim. This exposure led to a surge in album sales and concert ticket demand, with Roy embarking on a successful tour across the country. The momentum continued to build as Roy's music was featured in several high-profile films and TV shows, introducing a new generation of fans to his timeless sound. His collaboration with the Traveling Wilburys, a supergroup consisting of George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne, further elevated his status in the music industry. By the early 1990s, Roy had firmly re-established himself as a music icon, with a string of successful albums and sold-out concerts. His influence on contemporary artists was undeniable, with many citing him as a major inspiration. Roy's legacy was secure, and his career had come full circle, proving that true talent and perseverance could withstand the test of time. Orbison's performance at the Front Row Theatre in Highland Heights, Ohio, on December 4, 1988, was followed by a period of rest at his home in Hendersonville before he flew to London to film 2 more videos for the Traveling Wilburys. Plans were also in place for him to tour the US and Europe the next year. On December 6, 1988, he spent time flying model airplanes with his bus driver and friend Benny Birchfield before collapsing at Birchfield's home in Hendersonville. He was rushed to the hospital where he passed away from a heart attack at the age of 52. Memorial services were held in Nashville and Los Angeles, and he was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in an unmarked grave.